Welcome to the 2014 annual meeting and the close of our 40th anniversary year. My name's Elyse Eidman-Aadahl, and as your As your executive director, I am proud to say this amazing network is as healthy and as vibrant as any point in our history. So, yay for us. It's a kind of special thing that our 40th anniversary year that we get to celebrate it here in Washington, D.C., or technically right over the border from Washington, D.C., but still, given everything that this town has meant to the NWP over the years. And on top of that, it's really exciting to be able to turn the podium over for our classic welcome from the local site. You know, the DC Area Writing Project has had a proud tradition of serving this area since 1995. Many of you know some of the amazing leaders that have come out of that writing project, but I'm especially excited to welcome a brand new director to bring us greetings. Her name is Kelly Jenkins, and what an amazing and perfect way to celebrate both a continuing tradition and the bright future that we have than by welcoming here a new director into our midst. So would you give a warm NWP welcome to Kelly Jenkins, the new director of the DC Area Writing Project.
Thank you, Elyse, for that wonderful introduction. On behalf of the DC Area Writing Project, we would like to welcome you to the DC Metro area for the 2014 National Writing Project Annual Meeting. As you know, this year we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of the National Writing Project, who has been an organization at the forefront of expanding teachers' knowledge and expertise, as well as improving writing and learning for all. Reflecting on the past work of the National Writing Project, we recognize our sustained efforts and successes in improving writing and literacy in schools. As educators and supporters of education, we know that the most critical skills for citizens to prosper in a democratic society is that of literacy. Through writing and literacy, we possess an unimaginable power that can influence how we teach and how we learn. So as we celebrate the work of the National Writing Project, and our work as teacher leaders and teacher consultants, let us continue to press forward in improving writing, engaging learners, and connecting to the world in which we live. Thank you, and again, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for taking up the call for leading a writing project. And while we're celebrating newness and the future of our network, it's time to welcome some of our newest sites into the network. So we're going to extend a big writing project welcome to our newest sites. Some of them represent new places that the writing project is going to. Some of them represent new universities that have taken up the support of the writing project. But let's welcome them. Hold your applause, and then we'll give them a big welcome at the end of the list. So please welcome, in Kansas, the Flint Hills Writing Project. In Michigan, Top of the Mitt Writing Project. You know how that works, one way or the other. I know you do. In North Dakota, the Red River Valley Writing Project. In Oregon, Oregon Writing Project Collaborative at George Fox, and the Oregon Writing Project at Southern Oregon University. And in Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley Writing Project. If you're here from any of those, would you please stand and let us give you a round of applause? You're doing so well at welcoming. Let's do a few more. Excellent job. Now, I also want to welcome the individuals who together constitute the NWP Board of Directors. Each of our directors has really a profound commitment and a deep respect for the work you do and for the organization. Board members bring us expertise from a wide range of fields, from administration, from business, finance, communications, marketing, law, a whole range of things. And of course, also local site perspectives from the local site leaders that serve on the board. So with pleasure, I want to call to the podium our chair of the board of directors, Judith Warren Little. She is Dean of the Graduate School of Education at the University of California, Berkeley, home of the First Writing Project, and chair of our board of directors. Judith.
Hi, everyone. So this year, we're celebrating the 40-year roots and foundations of what is now, obviously, a vibrant national network. But first, I want to acknowledge that this is the first annual meeting since the appointment of Elyse Eidman-Aadahl as executive director, and to welcome her
We'll be in this plenary forever, so you need to.
Well, the rest of that sentence was to welcome her formally and publicly and collectively in this role, and I guess we just did that. Second, I had the pleasure last month of greeting TCs at Berkeley for BOP's Bay Area Writing Project's 40-year celebration. And the sentiments that I expressed to them then and there seem relevant here. So I hope the Bay Area Writing Project people will excuse me if they hear words they've heard before. Of course, I had to write them out in the spirit of this event in two formats. So we're here to celebrate not just an organization and not just a network, but really a movement, a vision, a set of principles that have endured through big swings in education policy and politics, through dramatic changes in resources, through changes in the ways in which we all engage with the written word. And throughout all of those changes, the Writing Project has had two commitments at its heart. The commitment to advance the teaching of writing everywhere, at every level, among everyone who thinks, reads, writes, talks, and the commitment to engage and support teachers in learning from and with each other. I am both honored and privileged to serve as the chair of the board of the Writing Project, because I have to tell you, my own work is in the area of teachers' professional development. That's what I study, that's what I learn from, and this organization has just been a beacon throughout the 30-plus years of my research. So I'm honored to serve as the chair of the board and as dean of Berkeley as the Bay Area Writing Project celebrates its 40th. My fellow board members and I are looking forward to joining you in the activities of the annual meeting today. And I wonder if the board members who are here, and we also have former board members here, so perhaps everyone who has participated in the board, current and past, could stand so that you can be sure and introduce yourselves to us. Thank you, and I look forward to the activities of the rest of the day.
One last welcome of some special guests. I'd like to acknowledge that we have Daniel Glick and Campbell Garish in the room. And their team is responsible for the film, the amazing film, A Place to Stand, which we'll be screening tonight actually in this room after the social. This amazing film characterizes the writing life of Jimmy Santiago Baca, a poet who is probably well known to many of you because his work's widely used in schools and nourishes the soul in many ways. But it's an incredible story of literally how writing saved a life. I'd like to acknowledge that our filmmakers are allowing this screening to be a fundraiser for the NWP Archives Project, for which we're very grateful, and very grateful for all of you who are coming. Still, there are tickets available. If you'd like to come to that tonight, it'll be in this room. And a special kind of connection, in addition to the theme of the film, two TCs, Denise Van Brigel and Kim Sheehan, are the folks who brought this to our attention some years ago by engaging the writing project in actually a Kickstarter campaign that helped fund the making of this film because of the importance of his poetry to their teaching and their work, and they're also with us. Everyone will join us tonight along with the poet to talk about his life and the film, so do join us. Okay, now turning to our anniversary celebration. So as you know, we've been saying it, this marks the end of our 40th anniversary year, a year we kicked off last year in Boston. I hope many of you were able to take note of the blog that we opened this summer called Our NWP. We opened that blog during the Summer Institute season and started it with a series that we called 40 for 40, where 40 of you blogged, one for each year of the National Writing Project. And it was amazing to watch those blogs. I thank you so much if you're one of the writers, and how they welcomed a whole new generation of teacher consultants into the network. Now, one of the things that we did in putting that blog together was we started to find some wonderful pictures. Weren't we lovely back then? 1974. So these are some of the artifacts that we've been finding. And I think these pictures are a delight, absolutely. So you see the first Summer Institute. Some of you are going to recognize Jim Gray at that point, talking. There's a number of people you might know, but on the left, there's Miles Myers, who would go on to become the executive director of NCTE that hosts us here every year. There's Mary Ann Smith. Yes, she's in the room to hear you go, aw. What I love is seeing some of these giants of our profession, but here they are, and Mary Ann's photo is a perfect example, as teachers, surrounded by the stuff of the classroom and their teaching lives. Isn't that fabulous? And now, 40 years later, here we are at the Bay Area Writing Project's 40th anniversary celebration. And there's the current director, Greta, and many of you will recognize Carol Tateishi, marking out their 40 years. Now, when I see these photos, I'm moved by the sense of a continuing tradition in the Writing Project. You don't have to recognize these faces. You have faces from your own sites, but you can recognize the Writing Project at work. You can see how we listen deeply to each other. And somehow, because we listen so deeply, that becomes an invitation to talk. You can see also how we take our practice public, and we put it in front of our peers for people to appreciate, but also to question, because we bring both strength and openness to the sharing of our practice. You'll certainly see that we write, and and we share our writing. And the writing that we do makes us thoughtful, and the writing we do makes us joyful. And it's all mixed together. I would argue that those scenes are all of our scenes, and we could swap out the faces from any of our writing projects to say, for 40 years, we have talked, we have listened, we have shared. We've been thoughtful, we've been joyful. Now, in his memoir, Teachers at the Center, Jim Gray, who describes in that the early years of the Writing Project, he makes it clear that in 1973 and 4, no one was planning at that point that we would be here 40 years later. No one imagined that there'd be 40 years of continuing tradition, or that we would span the country, or even sites around the world. And to be precise, as much as we want to celebrate our first Writing Project, they didn't do that. You all did that. You made this thing. You made it together by taking up the model and creating it in your own place. The model that we share is one we built together over many decades. It's both deeply local and it's common property for all of us. Between 1974 and 1990, over 127 places had started writing projects in 39 states. These are the writing projects I think of in a way as our first generation. And the leaders of these projects are amazing. They read like a who's who of composition research for current students. They are anthologized. We are anthologized. And this was the generation that really fought to establish writing and composition as a field of study long before there were PhD programs in writing and rhetoric all across the nation. And more importantly than establishing composition as a field of study, let's say harder than that, they established the study of teaching itself as a field of scholarship, as not just something you would do and let happen, but as something you would study and study deeply. And we thank our first generation for that. So much of what we know about writing research comes from that period of time, that founding generation. They established the notion that writing is a creative and a critical and an iterative process, the process. They established the sense that writing was something you do, it's work. You work at it. It might need a workshop. That's very much what we talk about now around making, needing a maker space. It's the same idea. They also help to see what a wide map is writing, that it's not just any one kind of thing. It's technical, it's personal, it's poetic, it's interactive, it's all those different things. It's also sociocultural, it's also rhetorical. And then finally, I would say they made some major distinctions for us and helped us understand things that we use daily, like the distinction between learning to write and writing to learn. A simple contrast that is so widely understood now, created by that generation. So, the last thing I would say is that by choosing as teachers and scholars to do this hard work, to build a writing project site, they chipped away in a really powerful way at the sometimes, especially then, closed and insular model of the university. They chipped away at it and demanded of their universities that those universities open up bit by bit to their communities, that they engage schools and teachers as partners and as equals, and not just as a market for courseware. That's a huge thing. And I have to say, for any one of us, for every director, co-director, and leader, the things we do every day, like figure out how to get a parking pass and a library card to someone who is not actually enrolled in a graduate program? You're nodding, you know, right? Think of that as a little triumph of open culture. This is like chipping away at the Berlin Wall or something that just had their anniversary a few years ago. So this is a generation of scholars. And one of my favorite items from our archives is this. You can see 1978. This newsletter from 1978 is the one where Jim Gray proclaims, after being awarded an NEH grant, "With this newsletter, we become a network." That newsletter would become the quarterly of the National Writing Project, publishing continuously from that newsletter to 2005. So let us salute this first generation of people who took up the idea of building a writing project by hearing some of their voices from the quarterly from those early years. We're going to hear them read from our microphones, so readers, if you would stand up, and you should have quarterly, the best of the quarterly on your chair. You can follow along.
So this is from Sheridan Blau. Well, not the first part. The first part's a biblical reference, but after that, it's Sheridan's words. "There's no new thing under the sun," says Solomon in the book of I knew I'd mess this one up. Ecclesiastes. And then he asks, "Is there any new thing whereof it may be said, 'See, this is new'?" His answer, it hath been already of old time." Chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes has been tested for 25 or 30 centuries of human experience and found to be largely true for every generation. But in our time, what may seem to be the truest of its maxims has been challenged by our own experiences as members of the California Writing Project community. For there does seem to be one new thing under the sun, and that new thing is the Writing Project. And what is fundamentally new about it, new in the history of education and in the history of efforts to improve classroom teaching, is the essential model of professional development that was envisioned by James Gray in its founding at the University of California, Berkeley in 1974. Jim's vision, his radically new insight, and the foundational principle of the Bay Area, California, and national writing projects was the idea that the answers to the most serious academic problems that beset schools and classrooms can be found in the expertise of experienced classroom teachers themselves. What experienced classroom teachers know, he insisted, is all the curriculum one needs for an effective professional development program. It was a new and shocking idea, and it has not been yet fully understood in the most precincts of the academic community. It is an idea that runs so much against the grain of conventional thinking about schools and teachers that many newer sites of the National Writing Project struggle for years to get it right. And when sites are unsuccessful, more often than not, they are unsuccessful because they fail to demonstrate an understanding of this first principle of the National Writing Project model. Let me try to state the principle more fully and accurately. It is that the most reliable and credible solutions to the problems of learning and teaching that face classroom teachers and their students are to be found in the reservoir of wisdom and practical knowledge that is constituted by the collective knowledge in the possession of experienced and successful classroom teachers themselves. Thus, the Writing Project looks to experienced and successful classroom teachers as the best resource available to the educational community for solving the academic problems that trouble us. Teachers are, in other words, not seen as the source of the problem, but as the principal resource for the solution.
The Parallel Universes of Theory and Practice, One Teacher's Journey by Beverly Pisano. Sometimes I questioned my new classroom environment and learning procedures. I even questioned whether learning should be fun. I remember vividly one particular episode that caused me to critically examine my methods. It happened when our classroom inquiries and experiences led us to explore letter writing. Carelessly, I assumed that any other teacher would be pleasantly surprised to receive an invitation to write letters, especially to the eager young writers that I had prepared for this endeavor. Having discussed the concept of pen pals and the logical contents of a letter of introduction, I printed on very large chart paper a letter that the children dictated. We all signed our names and drew self-portraits to send to our new friends. Then we created a large envelope out of construction paper, addressed, self-addressed, and stamped it. As soon as we sent the envelope to another school, we anxiously awaited our reply. Within a couple of days, the envelope returned, along with our letter and self-portraits. Enclosed was a handwritten note from a teacher. She had listed all the subjects she had to teach in the course of the school day, then added, "I don't have time for this." Unprepared for this response, and still somewhat fragile in my newly adopted methodology, I considered my options. I decided to send the envelope to another teacher. This time, the reply was an enthusiastic acceptance of our invitation to write. We soon became quite creative with our responses: Valentine's Day cards, Easter messages, even an invitation to visit. The children eventually wrote their own letters on computers, sent each other pictures, and even traveled by school bus to meet their pen pals for a picnic lunch, songs, and sharing. The pen pal activity encompassed all areas of learning and proved to be a highlight of our school year. However, I sometimes thought about the rejected envelope and the comment that accompanied it. Though I persisted in my pursuit of meaningful learning experiences, I often wondered what it was that the other teacher thought she didn't have time for. More importantly, I wondered how it was that I had time. Sometimes I wondered if we were spending too much time collaborating, reading our stories, and engaging in our work. I wondered if the children were learning enough rules and facts, and if they would be ready for the demands of the next grade. I wondered, and I wondered, until I saw the enthusiasm and felt the excitement. I listened to parents who told me that their children wanted to come to school, even when they were sick. I heard the children ask at the end of the day, Is it already time to go home? I looked at the pictures children drew of themselves, of their classmates, and of their teacher, and I saw the smiles on all the faces and the energy in every body. I wondered for a moment, and then I listened to the children.
Becoming Your Own Expert, Teachers as Writers by Tim Gillespie. Through the Oregon Writing Project, I discovered another reason for my writing with students. Here it is. Writing makes us experts on teaching writing. This discovery came thanks to my friend Kim Stafford, who said to me one day, whenever I can't find an answer to a student or classroom writing problem in an expert's book, I try to find it in my own writing. This insight reaffirmed for me the value of teachers writing with students. Writing is the best way for us to establish our own expertise and to be able to figure out our own answers to the difficult issues of teaching writing. For example, these things I know, not just because I read them in a book or heard them at a workshop, but because I write. I know that if I don't write daily, I lose a lot of steam. It takes me longer to get prepared to write, to build momentum, if I'm not doing it regularly. I know thus that my students have more barriers to break through if they're not writing frequently. I know that writings I'm forced to do, such as reports for work, are harder to sustain and less gratifying to complete than writing I choose to do. I know that my students likewise need to have opportunities to choose their own topics and projects. I know writing takes time. I can't finish pieces quickly. I work, get a burst of energy, come to a dead end. I put the piece away, return to it later, and putter with the words again and again. I know, therefore, that my students need some sustained time to write and to work and to rework a composition. I know that I often discover what I'm going to write as I write, that I often surprise myself with a new insight or image or idea. The learning that takes place as I write helps me know that students need to be encouraged and allowed to do multiple drafts of a paper, and they also need to be able to write, often without the constraints of preordained topics, forms, or outlines. I know I never think about mechanics during early drafts. Thus, I know that I need to help my students be freed of all concerns except their message on early drafts. I also know that it is extremely limiting to student growth to grade single draft papers. And finally, I know that I'm a better writer for the responses I get to my early drafts, from conversations with my wife, friends, and colleagues. I know I will help my students by trying to provide similar sorts of quality responses to their writing by organizing my classroom for writing conferences and student response groups.
The Teacher as Researcher by Marion Moore. The change began when I misspelled the word aggressive on a spelling list I had written on the blackboard. The students had accepted my spelling, which was missing an S, and copied the word onto their lists. Later in the week, I gave them a practice exercise. Again, aggressive was missing an S. Fortunately, one student in the class was brave enough to bring the misspelling to my attention. In my journal, I have recorded the gentle teaching method of that student. She said that she assumed that her dictionary was incorrect. But she had noticed a difference between the spelling I had given them and the spelling given in the dictionary. Grimly, I told the class that I had made a mistake and showed it to them, asking them to recopy the word correctly. I said that I would add it to my list of spelling words. They looked at me quizzically, amused at the idea. During the days between my acknowledgement of the error and the test, one or another of the students would quiz me on the word, a little hesitantly, but enjoying the situation to see if I had mastered it yet. Eventually, I did. On the test day, aggressive was the only word that every student in the class spelled correctly. When I considered all this in my journal, I thought of pretending to make a lot of mistakes during the year in hopes that it would increase the students' learning. As it turned out, I did not have to pretend. The humiliation of not knowing everything catches up with every teacher. One way I found to live with it was to begin asking why things happened the way they did in my classes. To become a student of my students, encouraging them to teach me about the way they learned.
Thank you, readers, and thank you, first generation of Writing Project sites. But of course, we didn't stop there. In Symbiosis, Sherry Swain's post on the blog Our NWP, she tells the story of one of those early sites, the Mississippi Writing Thinking Institute, founded in 1985 by one of our other giants, Sandra Price. Sherry tells the story of a writing project that just jumped in feet first and started teacher research groups, in-service programs, continuity programs in the first month, all of it. But what they did was bring themselves to the attention of their state. And pretty soon, this growing network of Mississippi educators had landed a contract with their State Department of Education as part of the Job Training Partnership statewide initiative. Working statewide, this group, not very old as a site yet, but still this intrepid group, would work with the teachers of 1,600 at-risk students aged 16 to 21 in an 8-week summer program. Now, Sandra engaged the researcher Herb Handley to study the program, and they looked at this question: will this curriculum and these teaching strategies make a difference in the academic achievement of their students? And the answer to that question turned out to be yes, and actually a very big yes. Reading gains averaging 1 year and 7 months. Math gains averaging 1 year and 9 months. Now, this data-driven story was the story that Sherry and others took to their relatively new senator at that time, Thad Cochran. That is not him as a youngster. That's him today. But listen, you know the rest of the story. You know that with champions like Thad Cochran, we built congressional support for the expansion of this network that eventually lasted 20 years. In addition to Senator Cochran, a Republican from Mississippi, we were also championed by Representative George Miller, Democrat from California. He would go on to be one of the most influential representatives, legislators in education policy over his career, which started in 1974 and ends with his retirement this year. Yes, Senate and House, Republican and Democrat, legislators and their staff working together across the aisle and across houses in ways that are almost hard to imagine today, but were routine then. And we have to also thank, in addition to those legislators and staff, amazing colleagues and representatives like Ellen Nolan and everyone at Washington Partners who have been part of our writing project for so long. These people helped invest in the expansion of the ongoing development of the NWP. Now, this story of 20 years of directed funding, we tell that story a lot, but we don't always tell that origin story, that it started with impact data, achievement data. It started with us taking responsibility to know that our work made a difference. Now, I think we do that in summer institutes as part of the model. We bring in not untested ideas, but classroom-tested ideas, and we put them down in front of our colleagues to respond to question, as well as to appreciate. We do that in all the ways we look at student work as teacher researchers or routinely in our practice. We do that when we use the analytic writing continuum, NWP's way of talking about growth in writing. It's also what 12 sites are doing now as they're participating in a large-scale study of the impact of professional development as part of our College Ready Writers Program study. So it was this early research and evaluation that in fact demonstrated that what we were onto made an impact for young people. And so when that was clear, then the policy question became one of equity. If this writing project makes a difference for young people, then isn't it only fair, isn't it only equitable that all teachers, that teachers of all kinds of students have access to one? So in 1991, with congressional authorization, we set about the task of scaling this network with this goal that we set at the time of putting a writing project experience within 50 miles of every teacher in America. The theory that you would drive that far, perhaps, for it. For some of you, I know you're saying 50 miles, I can't imagine, and some of you are saying, well, that's like next door. It's a big country, I know. But we embarked on this amazing course that I think in 1991 that teachers, educators rarely imagined, this notion of scale. And we did something amazing. We created our own little startup, a nonprofit called the National Writing Project Corporation. Some people left their sites to go work at that new thing. Richard Sterling, the very first employee of the National Writing Project Nonprofit Corporation, yours truly, number 2. Others of us lived the mission. You started sites. You made new site handbooks. You created NWP at Work monographs, teacher exchanges, opportunities to work and build together, to launch new sites well. And pretty soon, we created a network that would reach roughly 3,000 school districts every year, year after year. We also became a partner with the Department of Ed, and we are glad to say that there are members of the Department of Ed who are joining us here today because we scaled and provided an infrastructure for powerful opportunities to learn about teaching and learning. I would say we did one other thing, and this is a huge legacy of our second generation of sites. We created these national programs during that period. And every one of these national programs represents an infrastructure that scales knowledge. We learned how to work together as a national network. We learned how to take knowledge and results from one place, programs developed in one region, and move them across the country. We learned that every site has an opportunity, just like every teacher with a different classroom and a different set of students. Every site has an opportunity to learn and develop something particular and special in its place that may have broader applicability. How do we learn together? How did we create that knowledge? We did it through our program development. And along the way, by building all of those, we created a shared brand. Now, that's not easy work. We did it, and we did it well. NWP as a brand stands for quality uniformly around the nation. It means something, and we had to do that together. No one of us could produce that. It took all of us. We also, at that time, forged, I think, a really powerful counter-narrative to everyone now, the current conversations that would say what teachers can't do. We push up against that, whether the image is the resistant professor or the not so well prepared teacher. We are part of the answer to say no, teachers can. So our second generation can tell the story of one of the most successful federal investments ever. And I would say that that was successful because it was an investment built on the idea of what educators can do rather than what they can't. So let's celebrate this generation by hearing some of the voices of sites created at that period. And after that, we're going to hear from one of the most well-known to you students of federal investment, Mark St. John of Inverness Research Associates. Thank you. Readers.
Teaching in the time of dogs. We live and work in a time when we have tried to preordain crisp and neat learning outcomes for all of us. We have studied teaching and learning. We have invested lots of money in writing standards and spelling out benchmarks for students from kindergarten all the way through high school, and we have created the same sorts of expectations for teachers from their pre-service years through their completion of national board certification. And it is good to spell out our goals and to rigorously investigate our practice and to measure ourselves and our students against ideals. But the certainty of our current approaches neglects the stark image of the skinned dog, reminding us that the art of teaching, like the art of writing, lies as much in how we plan to create regularity. The skinned dog teaches a few but simple power rules about teaching, truisms of the skinned dog. We never know what to expect. We've never seen it all. In every interesting situation, we never really know what to do. We should always proceed with caution. We should always proceed. And if we apply the truisms of the skin dog to our contemporary educational reform effort, we come to understand how our efforts to raise standards for all students in an effort to narrow the gap between the top and the bottom don't take into consideration the unpredictable quirkiness that is part of the teachers' and learners' daily diet. The skin dog helps us understand that students at the bottom of the achievement gap are there because of complicated social, economic, and cultural reasons, and a forceful application of the upper middle class system of rewards and consequences will not likely have the desired effect. When a student confronts a skin dog on her way to school, the last thing she needs from the school is the opportunity to sit in class and move through a carefully scripted lesson pointed towards a high-stakes test. She needs an opportunity to tell her story. She needs a little help in understanding and interpreting her world, and she depends on us for that help. The fundamental flaw of our contemporary model for school reform is this: it begins with what we want students to know, not with the students themselves. It is nice, perhaps even essential, for us to know and agree upon what we want students to know and be able to do, but we will never be successful with this as our starting point. We can only improve schools and schooling by taking the students and their world and their cultures as our starting point. We have to work from the students towards the standards. We cannot simply work through the standards. In short, we have to account for the skin dog.
Computers and English, future tense, future perfect. Stephen Marcus. Efforts to predict the future of educational computing are particularly chancy given its rate of change. To paraphrase Alfred Bork at the University of California, Irvine, by the time the technology is free of bugs, it's obsolete. The future of literacy, that is, the nature and proficiency of reading and writing skills, is as uncertain in 1990 as it has always been. Pessimists note that the history provides ample evidence for questioning the desirability of the technological progress. In fact, when I first started working in the field, most English teachers proudly turned their backs on the future, ignored the present, and faced the past with hope and determination. Yet, Stephen Marcus offers us a list of possibilities. I'll read from that list. People will stop confusing real paper with virtual paper. Most of us still think of a word processor as merely a means of producing a printed document. Grading will become more dependent on the kinds of data available from style checkers. More education will take place in the home through instructional databases and telecommunication networks. Many of these will be provided by commercial sources, not educational institutions. Writing labs will become like studio art courses in which instructors can monitor and give immediate feedback on students developing texts and have their advice almost as quickly incorporated into the emerging documents. Software that generates its own text will change the nature of writer-text-reader relationships. Spelling and style checkers will make it even harder to convince students to learn many of the basic skills. Handwriting will denigrate for more students. In general, it will develop as one of the finer applied arts. Yet all is not lost because he concludes with this. The optimistic view, of course, is that computers and related technologies are providing new and increasingly rich environments that both enhance and transform students' capacities. The stability and vitality of the profession depends on talented teachers who acquire an informed exuberance. As usual, they'll be a major force in making the most of what the technology and their students offer to them.
Why Tequity by Joe Dillon. Why is it that when young people use technology on adult terms, they are praised as 21st century learners, but when they use technology on their own terms, they are castigated as deviant rule breakers? This quote from Nicole Mura's post at the DML blog stuck with me after I read it not long after it appeared on DML Central's website in May of this year. Her question, prompted by her dismay at the news media's portrayal of students during the rollout of a one-to-one iPad pilot in LA Unified School District, shines a spotlight on the narratives adults create about youth and their use of technology. Her question prompts educators to not only choose their words and stories carefully, but to reflect on how well we plan for increased access to digital tools in schools. We are living in the middle of the largest increase in expressive capability in the history of the human race. And yet, it's as if day after day I say, I have a bag of gold. Would you like a bag of gold? And people say, where do you find time for bags of gold? Like Mira, Campbell expresses frustration with educators who seem too harried to think through the digital sea change he observes from his perspective as a technologist and teacher in higher education. The tongue-in-cheek dialogue he shares is indicative of the disconnects that arise in schools of all kinds, pretty much everywhere right now, as mandated online standardized testing dictates that schools increase access to the internet and hardware tools. Technologists like Campbell, like me, see increased access as an opportunity to strengthen teaching and accelerate learning that schools may not recognize, much less seize. An equitable education system is one in which student achievement and learning are not predictable by race, class, language, gender, sexual orientation, or other such social factors. Aguilar's quote reminds me that our equity goals should rise out of our long, tangible experience with inequity. Our experiences with equity in education are too fleeting and too scarce for us to marshal large-scale, long-standing examples. Instead, we can identify a problem we hope to solve in order to pursue equity. For educators, the problem we must focus on as we seek to change schools, regardless of how internet access is working or not working, is the despicable predictability of how students will achieve or access opportunity based on race, class, gender, language, sexual orientation, and social factors.
Hello. I'm Mark St. John from Inverness Research. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Laura Stokes. And today I would like to prove to you that even evaluation, dreaded evaluation, can be a celebratory event. Let's talk about evaluating 40-year-olds, which is the challenge that we're faced with today. So the first thing is, in order to understand 40-year-olds, you have to understand the context. So the first thing to understand in doing research is to understand the context. So these are some things about what it was like in 1974. So the barcode scanner came about, gas is 55 cents a gallon. Most of us, actually not most of us, but the average income was $13,000, made less than that. Pocket calculator showed. That's what was happening when the writing project took root. Now this is proof that to understand the context or to do any research, you can't have everything be quantitative. There are just some essences of things that you need to capture in qualitative ways. Now what else happened in 1974? Well, the Bay Area Writing Project was started. And as we saw, Marianne Smith gives her first demonstration. And that began a long connection between myself and Marianne. I actually showed up at Berkeley in that year to begin my doctoral studies and ran into the writing project and later worked with Michael Scriven on the evaluation of the early writing project. My colleague Laura Stokes visited UC Berkeley with her high school classmates. And this last part, I had to fudge a little bit. I'm not sure actually if she was the top student in her 6th grade. So who else was born in 1974? Okay, so Derek Jeter and DiCaprio, and you know those people, I don't know who those people are. So are we approaching a midlife crisis? This is an important question that we should consider, and how to deal with it. And so I was looking up the research about turning 40, and I found this quote. It says, "I remember now that the toughest birthday I ever faced was my 40th. It was a big symbol because it said goodbye, goodbye, goodbye to youth." Because I think that one has passed through that age, actually, it's like breaking the sound barrier. So I want you to know that you're just getting started. This is like the time to take off. And also you ask, go back a second. If we ask 40-year-olds today, however, if they are in a midlife crisis, most of them will tell you they're too young and too busy to think about such things. I suspect This may apply to you collectively and or personally, I'm not sure. So let's talk about after 40 years. What has the National Writing Project actually become? So the answer is, and this may not surprise some of you who have heard me before, it's the nation's premier example of a national improvement infrastructure. And like infrastructure at highways and roads and things, it's an infrastructure that allows us to improve, to get better at getting better. And this is the rare, and I still don't understand why, when it comes to federal investment, really the unique example of the federal investment and the nation investing in a national improvement infrastructure. So the way it works is, as you all know, the NWP gets funding from federal and private sources and other sources, creates this national network of 200 sites. That supports thousands of local programs and teacher support activities and student programs. And about 100,000 teachers a year are supported in an ongoing way. The quality builds and is cumulative, et cetera, and we get improved learning experience for millions of students. This is a theory of action, a logic model, and it works. The light bulb means it's a really good idea. It's a really good idea. In the very beginning, there were just local universities, districts, and schools, and they all are out there doing their work and trying to connect. And then the National Writing Project came along and said, hey, we have a way to connect you. We have a way to provide glue, interaction between you all. And then the U.S. Department of Education, as Elyse was describing, says that's a good idea, and through Thad Cochran and others decided to fund it. And then they said, well, you know, maybe we could bring in some others, and they began having partnerships and arrangements. So it isn't just the National Writing Project. The National Writing Project is strategic and very clever at finding the right arrangements, the right connections, and these are all win-win arrangements. And they all add strategy, and they add fabric to the national infrastructure. You could think of how do you weave a strong fabric that is our infrastructure, that supports the improvement of education. And this is the fabric that the Writing Project is weaving. And they continue to build their relationships with organizations. The Educator Innovator is 42 partner organizations on its own. So this fabric continues to grow and is an important part of the story. And 22 different funders have contributed to the NWP, probably more, but this is a list we have, and shows you that good infrastructure isn't just funded by one source. It's funded by lots of different people, the consumer, the state, the local, the feds. Lots of people fund together to keep an infrastructure going, those who produce it and those who use it. So what has the National Writing Project actually done, though, over the past 40 years? We know what it is, but what has it done? So let's look a little at that. So it's accumulated 5,000 site years of experience. So one site going 1 year is a site year of experience, all right? So that's equivalent to having one site running continuously from 3000 BC. So we could have done it the way we did it, or we could have just started the Bay Area Writing Project in 3000 BC. So we have over 2 million hours of institutes and in-service community projects over this time, the cumulative amount of program hours. 2 million hours is an average of 50,000 program hours per year. That's about 140 hours of programming per day. That's about 25 programs per day, every day, for 40 years. So if you're tired, you know now why you're feeling. Okay, let me go back a second. Can we jump back? And also 200 million participant hours. This is a challenge for you. That's a little bit less. All the teachers going all those hours, 200 million participant hours. That's a little bit less than a Super Bowl in terms of participant hours. About the same. So I don't quite know what to make of that. That's your challenge, is for you all to debate this afternoon and tonight. What does that mean that anyway, about our culture and education? Okay. So leadership development, 80,000 teachers have participated in summer invitational institutes since 1974. And if we assume that translates maybe into half of those become active teacher consultants, they serve the 70 to 100,000 on average teachers per year, and that's 3 to 4 million teachers served over 40 years. It's on a scale unknown in educational improvement efforts. Trying to guess the number of students that are affected is an interesting exercise. I was a physicist. We were trained in order of magnitude estimates, so you kind of try to figure these things out in very, very rough ways. But if you take right now in our current status and past years, we're probably, through these various ways, reaching about 2 million students a year, directly and indirectly. About 1 in every 30 students in the United States every year is impacted by the National Writing Project. Again, nothing else operates on this scale. And then if we think, well, over history, what does that mean? Well, something like 200 million students have been touched by the NWP. So it's a huge number. And another way to think about this, next if we go on, is to say that sometime during their K-12 years now, approximately 1 in every 3 students in the United States will have a teacher who has participated in the NWP. So that's pretty amazing fact. I think you should reach everybody, but you know, you're young and we'll continue working on it. So evaluation is always careful about its conclusions and modest and guards its results, but at age 40, I would claim that the National Writing Project is the largest and longest standing professional development project in the history of the world. I know this to be true because it's in my 20 years of claiming this, no one has refuted it. So that remains true. And let me just also say to you that also means I'm charging you with the responsibility of being stewards of this thing. You are all, the good news is it's great, the bad news is you're all stewards of the most valuable asset we've ever created in the history of improving education. So please take care of it. Here's a prescription for midlife well-being, again from the research. You could apply this personally or to the project itself, but this is the kind of things that come out. Oh, there's another error of spelling. Good. Feeling good about yourself in your life. Maintaining meaningful goals and objectives. Being able to manage the complex demands of daily life. I don't know if any of you have complex demands of daily life. Feeling a sense of personal growth. Having caring and trusting ties with others and following one's conviction. These are good, it's good advice for a 40-year-old and for all of you. And finally, let me just conclude by saying, at Inverness, we always say we try to help good people doing good work. The teachers you serve, the teachers you are magnificent, and they're, again, the leading edge and the key asset you have. They are supported brilliantly and effectively by NWP sites, which is supported brilliantly by the NWP as an organization. And to the extent that we've been able to push from the outside a little bit and to support you all in thinking about yourself and having data about yourself and so forth, I'm just honored to be part of it. It's been the signature project of our evaluation life. I've learned a tremendous amount, so I thank you and I wish you Godspeed for the next 40 years.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone at Inverness for all the colleagueship and learning over the many years. So, popular convention would say that a generation is somewhere around 20 years. That's the way we sort of think about this generation, that generation. Historians, perhaps some of you in the room, would be immediately jumping up and saying, wait a minute, it's way more complicated than that. And it is, especially since in the room are people who have been part of all of those generations and will be part of the generation to come. But at 40 years, 2 times 20, it's just like too easy. So I'm going to go with it for a minute. Let's take a minute and think about those 2 generations, our founders' generation, our scalers' generation, and what they've left us as a legacy, which is to say what you've created as a legacy. So, among many gifts our founding generation left us with a model of peer-to-peer learning. Lots of folks are looking for that model right now. We have created a model for peer-to-peer learning and leadership development in that model of learning. And we have to say that it's a model that changes lives. We can't deny the fact that so many people walk around and say, the writing project changed my life. You hear it so much. We hear it so much that it's almost tempting to say, yeah, right, and it changed it. No, we have to own that. It really does. Think of our earliest mottos. I would say they both point to the power of peer learning. 1, teachers teaching teachers. 2, trust the process. They're both about peer learning. Also, because that model of learning needs a special setting, a conducive setting that lets that model thrive, we created a model of a platform. Everyone now is trying to create platforms for learning. We created a platform. That platform is the local site. That local site has more conducive affordances, we might say, for peer-to-peer learning and leadership development than the two institutions it connects with, the kind of big, maybe lumbering university that hosts it, or the perhaps hierarchical school district from which teachers come. So we created a third way, a model platform that allows for peer-to-peer learning and leadership development. And because we created a platform that was from the beginning an entirely humankind, we have in those however many million site years of experience, we've had the opportunity to watch thousands and thousands of practitioners learning on that platform. Something any tech entrepreneur would love to have, the chance to watch so many engaged learners embracing or resisting or struggling or failing or moving through professional development. We have multitudes of opportunities to study little case studies of what it means for practitioners to learn. We've built that together. And we have a model that taught us something really important about our core idea, and that's that the model of learning is inseparable from, in some ways, writing itself. We know really deeply the power of writing for learning. That's not widely shared by people who might think or talk about what writing is or should be, the power internally of writing as learning. So many years later, as a network, our founders built a model that gave us a legacy of peer learning, that give us a legacy of leadership development, and incredibly deep knowledge about writing. Now, writing is something that people are doing now all the time. They're doing it on those smartphones, on those tablets, every time they interact with the internet. And this knowledge about writing is part of what we were trying to say in 2009 when we created our vision statement. Writing in its many forms, it's the signature act of communication in the 21st century. Let's together envision a future where every person is an accomplished writer, engaged learner, active participant in a digital and interconnected world. The task probably for this generation going forward is to boldly carry that legacy, peer learning, leadership development, and understanding of writing in depth into the digital age. Now, we used to talk about putting a writing project within 50 miles of every teacher. We can transcend geography now. We used to think about how a writing project would deeply serve all the needs in its place. We can cooperate in programming and share knowledge in a way unthought of to our first generation. Let's carry forward into this new age. In the spirit of CL MOOC, I predict our third generation will be one that learns to use the open web for learning, creating, making, and being in a really powerful way that we only dimly understand now. And they're going to use it for themselves as learners, and from that they're going to figure out how to use it with students, with learning as the driver. Not tools as the driver, but learning as the driver. Now, our second generation, what about them? What have they left us? I would say that they left us a legacy of capacity and commitment. And if you're thinking capacity, like second generation, well, that's not all really that sexy after the model. I think capacity is about like the sexiest word around. I really do. Because we're in a world of a million startups and reform organizations and brilliant ideas. To be one of the groups that has actually done it, that's amazing. And we should proudly be selling that. We should proudly be saying that. And this isn't just kind of can-do spirit. That's not what I mean. I mean real capacity at a national level in this infrastructure. In everything from teaching and learning, yes, but also fiscal management and administration and event construction and a whole bunch of other kinds of things. This is about the rubber meeting the road. Rubber meets road and you get traction. So the achievements of our second generation, I think, show up in our mission statement. The National Writing Project focuses the knowledge, expertise, and leadership of our nation's educators on sustained efforts to improve writing and learning for all learners. What do? We focus our knowledge and expertise on sustained, important, significant challenges. Our second generation put this network to work collectively, nationally, and with commitment. That's what got us through the shock of 2011. It is no small achievement to say we are still here, and we are. So, for the third generation, what will we do with that capacity? What will we do to put it to work? Now, certainly there's a need for the work we've always done. All across the country, we know over the last decade, many schools moved away from writing, driven by the need to do test preparation in reading, in mathematics, and a range of things. Writing declined in terms of minutes, in terms of focus in many of our schools. But that's starting to reverse. Across the country, we see writing is coming back. You can talk about it from a range, depending on your region, why that is, but it is. And so our historic work is still relevant. We may be on the cusp, finally, as the push back on standardized testing, as the push back on narrowly conceived notions of what it means to educate. We may be on the cusp of new opportunities to create curriculum and share it, to do professional development around what's really meaningful for young people. So our time is probably coming. Only this time, like before, this time will be empowered by the most powerful communications tools ever created. And we're going to have new partners to work with. Mentioned before, Mark mentioned our Educator Innovator partners. Look at these amazing groups and organizations who have said, with you, NWP, we believe in moving education forward into the future. We will join you in this historic effort ahead. All of these are people who believe in viewing students and teachers not just as consumers of knowledge, consumers of policy, but as makers and creators. And I would say that's how we view young writers, not as consumers, but as creators. So innovative educators across all kinds of institutions are working together to build that. And I think in our third generation, we're going to find allies and maybe writing project members and partners in a range of learning institutions, in libraries, in museums, at the National Park Service, at a range of places, in game developers and software developers. Yesterday, I had the privilege of representing us with a lot of those people at the White House for a Future Ready announcement conference. One of the things that announcement was about was following up on a historic decision by the FCC to try to seek the biggest cap that they could, a $1.5 billion cap for the E-rate, to bring broadband access to every school and library in the nation. It's awesome. Not just to plug them in, but high-speed broadband access. What will we do with that access? I think we have ideas. I think the next generation will figure out how to put that to work, again, not just for the tools, but about the learning, connectivity, and power that that access will give us. So, in that notion of where might we go in the future, I now want to, kind of with excitement, announce the winners of the LRNG Challenge. What can that tell us about what the future might be like? Okay, first off, you may not know what I'm talking about, so let me tell you. LRNG is a challenge that we created with an example of a new partner. You might recognize up here singer-entertainer John Legend. He is talking to a group of absolutely wonderful next-generation new leaders at the New York City Writing Project. He's an example of a new partner. In these conversations, the notion that there are some key challenges that all educators are trying to solve if they're going to create the kinds of conditions where young people can do the work we envision them being able to do. One of them, for example, is time, and that came up again and again as a challenge in the readings. What happens when you send off your pen pal letters and it comes back, I don't have time for this? So what might it look like to take on some of those challenges and create, in effect, in our schools and universities, a platform for a different kind of learning? And that's what led to the LRNG Learning Challenge. So the MacArthur Foundation and John Legend's Show Me campaign together cooperated to say, let's invest in smart teachers making solutions. Here was the challenge they picked. How can we make more time and space for young people's creative, interest-driven work? What if there were no bells, no walls? The internet means we can start to think about that. Our partners agreed to provide $20,000 mini grants to a set number, as much as they could raise, and to invest in what teachers can do rather than what they can't. Huge number of proposals came in from all over the place, and you would be proud to say both that many of them came from writing projects, and some of them came not from writing projects. Also wonderful that people look to us for that leadership. All of them are proposals you'd be proud to carry the NWP brand. Now we want to take a minute and hear from one of those partners.
Greetings, National Writing Project. I'm so excited to join you at your annual meeting to announce this year's LRNG Innovation Challenge grantees. We received so many great applications, all of which reaffirmed my belief in our mission and highlighted many of the smart, dedicated, and innovative teachers that are ready to build the future of education today. We know that educators are the single most important factor for student success, and they have the power to unlock curiosity and love of learning in their students. The Show Me campaign was very impressed by the promising ideas shared in the proposals submitted. And through LRNG, we are investing in these teachers to help build out their ideas and innovations. We believe that by supporting these ideas, we can create the opportunities for our students to flourish. I'm so excited to embark on this learning journey with you all, and this is just the beginning. We have the opportunity to fundamentally reframe how we engage and support our educator community and, in turn, our students. Through LRNG, we want to challenge teachers to show us the impact of their models and ideas in a more expansive way. Impact on young people's lives, their creativity and capacities, or their skills in emerging areas like technology, STEAM, and social and emotional learning that go beyond the sometimes narrow boxes that we focus on today. Now, having read the proposals, I am already inspired by the ideas put forth and the potential for them to create engaging learning environments that ignite students' curiosity and passion. I hope that you all will spread the word and continue to envision the evolution of learning. Thank you for all the work you do on behalf of your colleagues and students across the country.
So thank you, John. He's not here to hear us clap, but... Okay, so if you don't know who John Legend is, go find out after the, talk to the people around you, go find out. And just to say, he's on vacation between tours in an undisclosed location. And so I want to say, he threw on that red t-shirt and somebody held up a cell phone camera because it was so important for him to be here with you today. So I just want to give him a great shout out for that. So what if really we are in the middle of a wide range of champions and partners, not just our classic partners, but for example, people in the entertainment industry who now want to say, let's go beyond the narrow boxes. Let's think about creative, critical, innovative learning. Let's build the future today and look to us as partners in that. That's the foundation for the third generation. So, to quickly tell you some of what the winners of this mini grant, $20,000 mini grant, will be doing, we're going to tell you some of the themes and show you where they are. So, there are some teams who are who are looking to the question of how we can use our technology to bring young people into deeper networking opportunities. A range of projects with young people having a kind of peer-to-peer learning experience that's internet-powered, but maybe also face-to-face. And how would that drive their interest-driven writing? Other teams are showing the impact of the maker movement and creating maker spaces or supports for maker spaces for young people to create across a whole range of things. Yes, writing is in there, but so is electronics and engineering and building robots and creating crafts. Other teams are taking very seriously the need to use digital media and to engage young people as creators across a wide range of media domains. And they're creating studios, and they're creating opportunities for young people to use the tools of digital media making in more profound ways. And then finally, a number of teams are working on really deep community connections, either by thinking of the community as their classroom and actually getting out of the school entirely in some ways, or by, in a really significant way, inviting the community into the school so that adults and young people and teachers are making and creating and learning together in a way that goes far beyond parent-teacher relationships or parent night. These are some of the powerful themes that show up in the 14 grantees, but I would say they also show up in the vision of all the applicants. And I want to thank both the winners, but also really all the applicants. Every one of these is a little vision of where we might want to go in the next generation, where maybe the tools and maybe the spirit will allow us to actually focus this network on what sustained work, maybe on some of this sustained work, the work of the future. If so, if we can see through these a little glimpse of the future, clearly, like the saying goes, we can see further in the future because we stand on the shoulders of giants. So, to close, and also to remind us of why actually, as our 40th anniversary project, we wanted to build a living and continuing archive of National Writing Project work. I want to invite, to close us out, two giants to the stage, Judy Buchanan, our Deputy Director, and Sheridan Blau, former Director of the South Coast Writing Project.
Thank you, Elyse. It's such a joy to be here and to introduce Sheridan Blau, who you already heard his words earlier in the plenary. Sheridan, like many of the generations we've been describing, has done many things. He's currently Distinguished Senior Lecturer and English Education Program Coordinator at Teachers College, Columbia University, and he was the founding director of the South Coast Writing Project at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And Sheridan's reason for supporting the NWP Archives Project and his own writing project story may actually have a surprise for you, so I welcome you to listen carefully. Sheridan?
So Judy, knowing me, gave me very strict limits here. I can't digress, and I'm going to read you something I wrote. That's all right. I feel like the ancient mariner. What I want to say about the archive project should perhaps begin with an example of the kind of information we need to archive and to be able to retrieve about the history of our project and its founders and their vision of a professional development project. So I want to begin with my own story of my first encounter with Jim Gray, which happened in either 1974 or 75. It was during that academic year. I can't remember what time of the year it was. It was either in the fall or the spring. And I was the recently tenured associate professor of English at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I'd been invited in that fall to serve as one of two representatives of the University of California at a meeting of what was called the Articulation Committee on English of a state-sponsored organization called the Intersegmental Coordinating Council. And it's a fancy name, but it was actually an interesting committee because it consisted of teachers who represented every level of education in every segment of education in the state of California. And as it turned out, when I joined the committee, I met a bunch of people whom I hadn't known before. And many of those people turned out to be really key people in the founding of the California and the National Writing Project. and I don't have time to tell you who they were, but people in California especially will know them. And there's a whole story here that I'm not allowed to tell. The relevance of this committee meeting, however, to my present story, is that it was at this meeting where I first met Jim Gray. He came to the meeting with Cap Lavin, who was one of the founding co-directors of the Bay Area Writing Project. And as I said, this was 74, 75, and they had just had their first summer of the Bay Area Writing Project. And Jim had come to this meeting to talk to all of these English teachers about what happened. And his secret motive was to recruit some people to start other writing projects in California. Well, Jim Gray and I had never met before, but we knew each other slightly by reputation. I've been teaching at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and I taught a Milton course and other upper division courses, but Milton in particular, where I had lots of students who were juniors and seniors when they took the course, and they went on to Berkeley to get their teaching credentials. And they would come back to Santa Barbara and tell me about this guy, Jim Gray, who ran the credential program and how brilliantly he ran it. And he also taught a writing course there, and they thought this was just a magnificent writing course. But they also said that he and I were in some ways alike, and they thought our teaching resembled one another. And they all would say, I have to meet him. And apparently they told him about me, and there was this person at Santa Barbara teaching this Milton course in ways that were not quite conventional, but that resembled the way Jim taught. So when we met each other, we knew we were going to have some kind of affiliation. And I was happy to talk to him. And he, as soon as he realized I was at the meeting, he had his sights on me as someone to create the second writing project in California. But it was not to be. He told me all about his project and how it worked. And I realized I didn't know teachers like that in Santa Barbara. I'd been teaching in Santa Barbara at that time for 4 years, and I'm running the credential program, and I hadn't met the kind of teachers that Jim met, except for a couple of them. And I couldn't see myself spending a summer with teachers who would want to teach grammar and talk about the 5-paragraph essay. So I wasn't so interested in starting the project, mainly because I actually didn't understand what Jim was talking about. I didn't understand the principles that he was working with. I could hear the words, but I didn't know what they meant. And it took me another 4 years or so to realize, and we didn't start our project in 1979. But even though I didn't understand what Jim was saying, I knew there was something important here. And I spent as much time as possible that day in deep and animated discussions with Jim and with Cap Lavin, during the breaks in the meeting and at lunch, and then for some time after the meeting ended. And while I didn't understand what they were trying to tell me about the writing project as an idea and a principled set of practices, I nevertheless understood quite intuitively that I was in the presence of two great English teachers. One of them a university supervisor in English Ed, and the other a legendary high school English teacher from Marin County. And I knew that these were teachers whose understanding of the teaching of English, and especially of the process of becoming a highly professional teacher, was far deeper and more comprehensive than mine, and I was powerfully struck by the sense that there was a great deal I could learn from them if I could only spend enough time in their company. Never before in my life, and never since, except when I met Miles Myers, I must say, have I ever encountered any other teachers or colleagues with whom I felt more powerful affinities, or whom I so clearly recognized as potential mentors, models, and professional guides for me. And that, of course, is what Jim eventually did become to me for over 25 years, starting in 1979, by which time I was finally ready to become the founding director of my own writing project at UC Santa Barbara. And how that happened is another story I'm not allowed to tell today. Cap Lavin, for personal and health reasons, had to withdraw from his formal role in the writing project not long after I met him, but he remained for me the model for what the most talented and brilliant high school English teacher might aspire to become intellectually and professionally. And while I can't tell the story about Cap Lavin much either, I am going to take the time just to mention something about Cap. A little known fact about Cap Lavin, who, as I said, was one of the co-founders with Jim of the Bay Area Writing Project. And that fact is that he had been the only working classroom teacher among the 50 distinguished scholars, researchers, and university professors who participated in the historic Anglo-American conference on the teaching of English at Dartmouth College in the summer of 1966. Most all of you in English Ed know about this conference and know how important it was in the history of education. Cap was the only working English teacher there. And I think that has enormous implications for the founding of the Writing Project and how the Writing Project saw itself. And I think this is especially true since another person who was a key figure there who had already stopped teaching, so I can't count him as a teacher, was Jim Moffett. And I know that Cap got to know Jim at that meeting, at that conference. And in the first summer of the Bay Area Writing Project, Mary Ann and Joe Fife gave a presentation that Jim talks about based on Jim Moffat's work. And so the question is, how did Jim Moffett get into the Writing Project? I think it was probably through Cap initially, and I'll check that out with Mary Ann. At any rate, that's a story that I can't elaborate on. So I now will get to my charge, which is to say something about the archive project and why we all need to give our money to it. I should say, if you want to retire and sort of pass out of currency in the Writing Project, then give a lot of money and then you'll be invited to come back and speak about it. I gave immediately. I owe everything my professional life to the Writing Project, so I knew I was a good one to call to get some money. So let me say this about the archive project. It is axiomatic that profound and subtle ideas lose the force of their intention and their complexity and the complexity of their insight when they become popular and widely cited as the basis for action or analysis. This is surely the anxiety that accounts for the tradition that mystical knowledge can be passed on only in person from master to disciple. And it explains the anxiety behind the Socrates' suspicion of writing and Plato's effort to dramatically recreate the living dialogues of his own mentor, Socrates. Ideas that represent true advances in education seem especially liable to devolve in their popular application into a desiccated parody of their original illuminating and generative antecedents. Dewey himself complained that what we have seen repeated in almost every generation as the ideas fundamental to a truly progressive education become widely adopted and then discredited as they are misapplied and perversely interpreted by an intellectually irresponsible and thoughtless educational bureaucracy. In the educational careers of many of us in this room, we have seen the brilliance of transactional reading theory turned into an exercise in free association and interpretive anarchy. We've seen the insights of genre theory used as an excuse for teaching mindlessly formulaic writing, and we are witnessing at this very moment the exhumation of the corpse of the discipline of close reading, turned now into a deliberately autistic zombie, obsessed with the technical descriptions and incapable of thinking about contexts or exercising any moral or ethical intelligence. The Archive Project represents one important strand of the effort of the National Writing Project to remain faithful to the insights and principles of our founding mentors. It is our way of preserving the documents and memories and oral histories of Jim and his closest colleagues from the early days of the Writing Project as an expression of our collective faith in the enduring value of Jim Gray's vision and of the manifestation of that vision in the early practices of the Bay Area Writing Project, the California Writing Project, and the National Writing Project. This does not mean that we don't want the Writing Project to change. We're not going to resist it, apparently. Our earliest history shows how our practices were honored and passed on as the BOP and NWP model became the models for newer projects, newer sites, and yet those sites were always changing and always advancing our thinking about what our job was and how we have to work in a writing project, always in an effort to more perfectly fulfill the foundational vision of teachers teaching teachers and the foundational value of teachers at the center, and the still radical idea of teaching itself as a process of constructing and tactfully managing opportunities for learning for our students. Still, none of us who are the remaining living tablets on which the Writing Project's principles and practices were engraved by Jim Gray's severe yet loving mentorship should ever forget or neglect to warn our successors, many of you, that the values and core practices of our Writing Project are always in danger of being compromised and assimilated into whatever new theory or educational fad or set of standards or outcomes or movement is currently in fashion. Jim's most emphatic warning and worry was directed at keeping the writing project free of any entanglements that might compromise our principles or pervert our practices. The NWP archive provides a living history that will help us and future generations remain faithful to Jim's vision of what the writing project is and does, and to the spirit in which we work together as mutually supportive colleagues in a learning and knowledge-building community.
Thank you, Sheridan. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone in this room and elsewhere who has already posted and tweeted and shared their stories through our NWP thus far. We're going to end with actually one of Jim Gray's principles. We'll get to that in a sec. One of our NWP blog posts, written by Tanya Perry, there is dressed in a particular garb. She's the director of the Red Mountain Writing Project at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And she provides the writing prompt for the close of today's plenary session, something that I think Jim would appreciate. Thank you, Tanya. NWP is in the right place at the right time to forge boldly into the next generation of innovation. We are positioned to help give voice to teachers, families, and children who need a pen, an opportunity to learn, and access to a quality education. Today is the first day of the next new 40 generation. Let us think individually and collectively about what we will do to impact this new generation. How will we adapt to the demands and needs in this new territory? What resources can we share to help each other do this important work? How can we, the new 40 generation, collaborate among sites and with outside partners even more successfully to become innovators? Let us embrace this journey with courage, intellect, innovation, collaboration, wisdom, tenacity, and fervor. Let us go together where we've never been before in the next 40 years.